This lesson is on multiplying out single brackets and simplification. This is something you will already have done in Broad General Education, and therefore we're just going to extend it slightly for National 5. If we start here, this is the important sentence. When we see a number directly in front of a bracket, that number is multiplying each term inside the bracket. So in the situation like this first example here, 5 followed by a bracket, with 6x plus 3 in the bracket, it means this 5 here is multiplying everything inside that bracket. So the first example, multiply out the brackets, that's the first step, and simplify where possible. Now it won't always be possible to simplify, but in some questions it will be possible to simplify further, so we're going to look out for that. So in the first example, part A here, we have 5 multiplying this 6x plus 3. So we're going to start off by drawing a little line from the 5 to the 6. Now, that's our first multiplication. What I'm doing by drawing that little line in is I'm reminding myself that I'm doing 5 times 6x. When you're multiplying algebraic terms together, it's a good idea when you're going over it in your head to say the sign always. So when I start to multiply this in my head, I don't just say 5 times 6x, I start to think of it as positive 5 times positive 6x. So positive 5 times positive 6x is positive 30x. I'm then going to draw another line to remind myself that we have 5 times the 3. So the 5's multiplied the 6x already, that's done in red there, and now that 5 needs to multiply the other thing in the bracket, which is 3. So positive 5 times positive 3 is positive 15. Now in this case, that question is finished. There's nothing I can simplify there, and by simplify, what we'd be looking to do is collect like terms. This is again something you'll have done in the Broad General Education. So in this case, I have no like terms. I have an x term and I have a constant term. So no simplification possible in this case. We'll have a look at the next one. A little bit harder because it's got an x outside the bracket, but it's dealt with in the same way. We're going to start off. We've got the 6x outside the bracket, which means that 6x has to multiply everything inside the bracket. There are two terms inside the bracket, the 2x and the negative 3. So positive 6x times positive 2x, and that's going to give us 12. Now, x times x is x squared. And then that's the first term done. So again, thinking about the sign, thinking about the number, thinking about the letter. Next one, I've got positive 6x times negative 3. Now, we know positive times negative is negative. 6 times 3 is 18, and there's only one x term there multiplying, so x. Now again, at this stage, I need to look at that and I need to say, is there any like terms I can simplify? Now, x and x squared aren't like terms. Okay, if it was 12x take away 18x, then I could simplify it because x and x would be like terms, but in this case, no like terms, so this cannot be simplified any further. In example C here, we need to be really careful, and this is one of the common mistakes that we'll have to look out for when we go onto the textbook and the exercises. In this example, we have at the start 3 plus 4, and then we have this 4 times this x plus 7 in the bracket. So the 4 has to multiply the bracket, and this 3 needs to be added onto something. So the question is, do I do the 3 plus 4 first, or do I do the 4 times the bracket first? What you've got to remember about this situation here is, this is multiplying out brackets, and therefore multiplication. If you think back to your order of operations, which you'll probably have seen referred to as BODMAS, or BIDMAS, and you look at where those two things appear, so where does addition appear in relation to the multiplication, and remember that's 4 multiplying the bracket, what comes first? So multiplication comes before addition. Now that means in this question here, I need to, despite the fact it would be very easy to do 3 plus 4 is 7 straight away, and that might be the temptation, I need to remember to actually multiply out the bracket here. So I'm going to do the 4 times the x first. Now when I write that out, I'm going to just drop this 3 straight down. In other words, that's going to remain in place at the start, try and keep things in the same order, and then I'm going to go on to the 4 times the x. Now it's positive 4 times positive x, so that's positive 4x, nice and easy. We're then going to multiply the second thing in the bracket by the 4, so that's positive 4 times positive 7, which gives me positive 28. Now up until now it hasn't been possible in any of the examples we've done to simplify, but this is the first example where things can actually be simplified. We have here our 4x term, and we have this 3 and this 28. These two terms at either side are both constant terms. In other words, they don't have an x term attached to them or any letters attached to them. so they can actually be simplified or brought together. This is what we called collecting like terms. So we'll start off with our x terms. How many x terms do I have here? So I have 4 x's, positive 4 x's, and then I have positive 3 plus another 28, which is positive 31, and that's my like terms collected, and therefore that question finished. We'll now look at a slightly different example. This time we have 2 separate brackets, okay, and they're both being multiplied by something in front of them. So the first bracket is being multiplied by this 6, and this second bracket over here is being multiplied by this negative 2. Now at this stage we're going to write something up at the side here, which is be careful with signs. So we're going to be paying particular attention to our positives and negatives as we go through this, because there's a very common mistake that people make here, and we'll point it out as we go through. So let's start off with the first bracket, which has been multiplied by 6. So 6 multiplied by x, so again that's positive 6 times positive x is positive 6x. We'll then move on to the second bracket, and we'll draw our second line from the 6 to the next term in that bracket. So positive 6 times positive 3 is positive 18. Now, when I get to this stage, the most common mistake that people make is multiplying this second bracket out by 2. But this number here isn't 2, this number here is negative 2. So just when I say be careful with signs, what I'm meaning is paying attention to any positives and negatives you see throughout the whole question, but particularly ones between brackets like this. Let's start again with this. Now we've got that in our mind. And again, we've got negative 2 multiplying 2x. Now again, we're thinking about the signs as we go through this. So negative 2 times positive 2x is negative 4x. And then with the second one here, we have negative 2 times negative 5. Two negatives, remember, multiply to a positive. So negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. We're then at the stage where I've multiplied out all the brackets, so the next step is to look and see if I have any like terms. Now, that means I need to look at the different types of term that are there. So I have an x term here, so 6x, and I have another x term here, negative 4x. Now both of those can be brought together to give me a single x term. This positive 18 here is what we call a constant. Remember, a constant is something that doesn't have a letter attached to it. In other words, it's just a plain number. And 10 is also a constant, there's positive 10 at the end. So they can be brought together into a single term. So we'll start off with our 6x and our negative 4x. These are my 2x terms, and I'm going to bring them together again. Pay attention to the signs as you go through this. So positive 6x, take away 4x, is positive 2x. We'll then look at my next terms, which are my constant terms. So I've got my positive 18 here and my positive 10 here. Again, paying attention to the signs. I've got positive 18 plus another 10 is positive 28. And that is me finished with that question there. So we'll just write a little reminder of the important part of that question up at the side here, which is that you're multiplying the second bracket by negative 2 and not just 2. In the last example, which we're going to bring together everything, so it's made it deliberately a little bit tricky here, we're going to have a look at what we've got. Starting off with this 4x here, take away 2 times a long bracket, add the 6. So again, going back to our point we made earlier about BODMAS, we have subtraction here, we have addition at the end here, but this 2 is multiplying out this bracket here. So I need to make sure I do that multiplication first. That means when I come to do this, I'm going to just drop the 4x straight down, because I'm not going to do anything with that on this line. And what I am going to do though is I'm going to start multiplying through this bracket by negative 2. Now again, paying attention to the signs there as we've talked about before. So this bracket has 3 terms in it, so we're just going to go through them one at a time. This negative 2 at the start needs to multiply each term inside the bracket. Negative 2 times positive x squared is negative 2x squared. We then go on to our second multiplication. Again, that's negative 2 times negative 3x. Now negative times negative is positive, 2 times 3 is 6, and we have 1x term there. So negative 2 times negative 3x gives us positive 6x. The last one here, we're going to multiply negative 2 times positive 3, which is negative 6. Lastly, there's a term at the end here, but you'll notice it's not inside this bracket. The bracket is closed off here. So this negative 2 is only multiplying the bracket, and therefore this positive 6 at the end here doesn't get multiplied by the negative 2. So we're just going to drop that straight down into this position here. So positive 6 just drops down in the same way that this 4x at the start just dropped down. So until we've done this multiplication, which starts at the negative here and ends at the end of the bracket here, the other things outside that are just going to drop down a line and be dealt with at the next stage. We'll now go to the second stage of these questions, which is once we've multiplied out the brackets, we look to try and simplify by collecting like terms. Now, we have three different types of term here. We have our x squared term, and you'll notice when I'm highlighting this, I'm also highlighting the negative in front of it. That negative belongs to that 2x squared term. Okay, so we've then got our x squared terms. We have our x terms, and again, you'll notice I'm including the sign directly in front of it in each of these cases. So 4x and positive 6x, there are two x terms. And then lastly, we have our two constant terms at the end here, negative 6 and positive 6. And what we're looking to do now is just bring them together into the last line. So on the last line, we'll start off with our highest power of x, which is what I've highlighted in green here. This is our negative 2x squared. There's only one x squared term there, and it's negative 2x squared. And we'll then move on to our x terms, which is positive 4x plus another 6x, which is going to give me positive 10x. And lastly, our constant terms at the end, negative 6 plus 6. Thinking about that on a number line, if you're at negative 6 and you add 6, that's going to bring you up to 0. So we're not actually going to write anything for those last two because they actually cancel each other out and leave us with no constant term. That means that this question is now done and we're ready to move on.